Okay, this is the Friday, October the 7th meeting of the Faculty Advisory Committee. It's being recorded and will be put up at the Board of Regents site on YouTube. Lois, I assume we have a quorum?
That would be a good question.
Okay, well, work on it. We'll just make that assumption.
Okay.
So the agenda, let me just share it if I can. Can you see the agenda? So it's minutes of the September meeting, and I'll put those online in a second. And then basically report on the September Board of Regents meeting, report on community colleges, report on Academic Student Affairs Committee of the BOR, report on universities, report on Finance and Infrastructure Committee, planning for the November joint FAC BOR meeting, planning for November FAC pre-conference, other business, and then adjournment. So could I have a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay. Any amendments to it? Any opposition to it? I presume then it's approved. Okay. I don't know if you can see now the minutes from the last meeting. Might have to stop this and start it again. That should be the minutes of the last meeting, which was available on the BOR website. That's page 2. There's a total of 3 pages. And that's page 3. Are there any modifications to the minutes of the last meeting? If not, those in favor of adopting the minutes, say aye. At least one person has to say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Those opposed? Approved. Okay, so we can go back to the agenda. And I'm hoping that you can still see it. Can you see the agenda there? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so report on the September Board of Regents meeting. I can do that briefly. It was interesting because it was the first meeting which was held, at least in part, in person. And so both Colina and I were down there at the Board of Regents building in Hartford. And there were a number of other people, although it was the majority of the folks were still online. Chair Ryan was present, President Cheng was there, Rich Balducci, Chair of the Infrastructure Committee was there, and so was Regent Bloom. I can't recall if he was there in person or online. I think he was there in person from the Academic Affairs Committee. It was a little complicated, and I empathize with Chair Ryan. It's really hard to manage a hybrid meeting. It's more difficult than either a meeting in person exclusively or a meeting online exclusively, because you have to keep track of the folks who are there with you and the folks who are online. And those folks were sort of projected, their images were projected behind the chair of the meeting. So it was a little difficult, and at some point, I think there were some things that I know I wanted to say I didn't have the opportunity to because I just couldn't be seen to be recognized. Nonetheless, I just have a couple of comments about it. The public comment period was, I think, improved. And I noted that members of the board actually took note as to what faculty were saying during the public comment. Pleasingly, Chairman Chang had something nice to say in his opening remarks about Seth Freeman, and Seth Freeman had something nice to say about President Chang in his public comment. So that was a significant improvement. The meeting itself, I think the major issue for us is the whole question of the budget deficit, the expected budget deficit for FY23 and 24, if I recall correctly the numbers. And it's 105 million and 110 million. And I know that the presidents of the universities at least have been, and I imagine the president of the one community college, I don't know if it was sent to the CEOs of the individual community colleges that currently exist, have been instructed to prepare scenarios for a 1% budget cut, a 2% budget cut, up to, at the very least, a 5% budget cut. And I don't know if that has sort of filtered down to any of the folks representing the universities or the community colleges. Has there been any discussion? No. So I suspect this is an issue to come up again, and it's really quite unfortunate because it really has the effect of depressing faculty morale. I mean, we're in a situation where there is a several billion-dollar surplus in the state budget, and there is the rainy day fund is full at also several billion dollars. I think one of the things that we need to look at, and which we will be looking at more closely when we have our joint meeting with the BOR on full funding for public higher education, is getting out of this cycle of impending budget deficit, proposed budget cuts. All of that creates a negative atmosphere. And I know that we know that at the community colleges, faculty morale can't be said to be high, for reasons that we've discussed at length. At the universities, my impression is that faculty morale also is on the decline. And I know we had Ratu who spoke to us about the situation at Western, and I know that there are some situations that have arisen and concerns expressed both at Central and at Eastern. So that one of the things that I plan to bring up again at the next meeting of the Finance and Infrastructure Committee is to have our focus changed from predicting budget deficits and scenarios for budget cuts to proposals for full funding for public higher education and establishing a more positive and optimistic perspective so that we are not continually looking to do the same with less or more with less, but rather to be appropriately funded for the work that we do. I don't know if anybody was able to watch the last Board of Regents meeting, if they have any comments. There was two policies that were adopted. One was on public comment periods, and the other was on the use of residences at the universities over the summer. As concerns the second, the policy was really intended to deal with a particular situation where residence directors want to have their family with them on campus living in the residence. And apparently it makes it difficult to attract people to do that job if they have to be separated from the rest of their family. And so it made sense to have this policy, but it was framed and titled as to use of the residences in general for non-students. And as I pointed out at the Finance Committee, really there has to be a separate policy for use of residences over the summer for academic related events such as conferences that faculty or departments may organize, institutes, and that sort of a thing, which really is not the same thing as what this policy was intended to cover. So that's an issue. Apparently the matter has been sent to the university presidents, but it would be worthwhile to mention that really the policy as adopted by the board is really specific to that that situation of residents, directors, and perhaps maybe a visiting faculty member who would prefer to live on campus for a month or 2 months during the term. But the whole question of what to do over the summer, really, that's a separate issue. As far as the public comment period was concerned, I think it was just an effort to promote civility and collegiality and a sense of community, if that were possible, at those public comments. But I do think, irrespective of the details of the policy itself, there is a greater willingness on the part of members of the board to actually listen to what faculty have to say and to take note of it. And that's an improvement over the past, where 10 or 12 faculty in a row would get up and make serious criticisms, and then we would move on to the next item of the agenda as if they had not said anything. So I do know a slight improvement in that respect. Any further comments? Lena, do you want to do? Go ahead.
Is that you're saying to me? Yeah, this is Rob,
yes.
Rob Whittemore from Western. I just wanted to add another note to that residency issue. That if you apply, for example, with an international scholar to visit campus through the Fulbright program, one of the ways you can get that is to show that you have an institutional contribution of a particular value that adds up to about $30,000. And one of the ways to be able to do that is to say you're giving a residence for a visiting scholar who will be coming for a full year. And that scholar is supported by Fulbright, sending them to meetings in the country, to other universities to give lectures, and so on. But if the university doesn't permit us to do that in the res halls, then you can't be able to show that you have that collateral, which disqualifies you from being able to apply for what I think is an extraordinary opportunity for any of our universities. Just a comment.
Yeah, I think that person would be covered by the policy. There would have to be a background check. The policy specifies that the resident location is not required by a student and that sort of a thing. So I suspect that would be covered by it, but they really hadn't thought that out very explicitly, and so it was mainly being presented as a question of the residence directors.
Thanks.
Okay, Helena, do you want to do the report on community colleges?
Yeah, but I think Mike Shea's hand is up also.
Oh, sorry, I can't see that.
That's okay. Thanks, David. I just want to say I was glad to hear your observations about the thawing or the connection in the meeting. That was the experience that Fran Cohn and I had when we met with two new members of the board. And also, I have to say that when President Chang visited Southern, I thought it was I thought he listened a lot there too and took notes. So, you know, what matters is actions. We understand that, but I think you're right. The atmosphere is seeming to get better, and I hope we can capitalize on that, and that you know that what we see is a sign of what's really happening, because I think we need to with the. I agree with you about the the budget in the surplus budget in the state. We really need the support of the system office to sort to convince the legislature to fund us better, and it's hard to get that support when there's division. So anyway, I was just glad to see that you saw what you saw and for reporting it, David. Thank you.
Okay, I should also add that Regent Murphy was named as the vice chair, right? And so he is a new member of the board with an academic background at City University of New York. He's obviously a resident of Connecticut. So there have been significant changes in leadership. The president of the CSCU, the president of the provost of the CSCU, I think it's still an interim president of CSCC. Polino, you might correct me on this. One has to always be careful about the interims and the non-interims, as well as the chair of the board and vice chair of the board. Okay, go ahead, Polino.
Brendan, You wanted to say something first?
Yeah, just one bit of feedback on steps the board might be able to take to kind of foster an environment of more positive environment in terms of faculty comments. So, I did have some remarks at the last Regents meeting, and I think I had to wait an hour and a half to make those 3 minutes worth of comments. That's a pretty costly ratio of faculty time. I could have been working on my classes. I could have been, working on my scholarship. And so, I think this has come up before, just, making faculty wait 90 minutes to say something for 3 minutes is not a great use of faculty time. So maybe taking a hard look at that structure of the meeting flow. Rearranging that might put faculty in a slightly better mood when their turn comes. So that was my bit of feedback.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Actually, that's how it worked previously, and that was changed about 6 months ago. So we'll bring that up.
Yeah. All right, so I will go now and I will say that, Ron had mentioned some issues also with the policy on public comments, and maybe we could return to it to make a recommendation there because, yeah, absolutely, putting it after all the introductory presentations and so on keeps people on the hook for a really long time. Before I get into the committee reports, just kind of want to mention to just kind of respond to what you're saying, Mike. Sorry, I had a blank there while I looked at your face. I want to respond to what you're saying about funding because I think it's absolutely right that we have to get out of this constant crisis situation when we ask for funding. And yes, collegiality helps, and we should absolutely be partnering with administration to ask for that money with a single cohesive voice. And yet at the same time, I don't see that as the primary obstacle, because you're supposed to have a sort of dynamic, challenging, you know, um, you know, atmosphere here where we're pushing for the best product. I think that because there is a lack of willingness to fully properly fund us from the legislature, the only way that the administration has been able to convince them to fork over the dollars is to pantomime chaos and crisis and we're falling apart. And that's a okay short-term solution, but it's not an okay, we've been doing this for over 10 years now. And when we ask ourselves, we've heard from the administration, well, they don't treat UConn necessarily like this, and UConn, it's not just the collegiality, it's that, if you continue to front load a narrative of crisis and destruction, why would they feel inspired to fund us? We are telling them that we are failures. I mean, the narrative for the community colleges has been, we are failing the state, we are failing the students, we're failing everything, right? Please fund us. It makes no sense at all. So I'm really looking forward to our joint meeting with the BOR and really getting this narrative together properly, because we have to explain why we've been in this crisis and lay that at the feet of the legislature and really tell them what it would take to have a successful system. And I think with as large as we are, that should be a compelling case to make. And the fact that we are like the backbone of public higher ed, right? For the entire state. So I hope we can do that. Andre.
Yeah, perhaps we can talk about cost effectiveness. I mean, one of the things that, again, I used to be a management consultant, used to do whatever cost analysis and turn around companies that were about to go under. Point is that I think I've always been impressed in terms of our institutions that we are extremely cost effective. Actually, we deliver a very good product very, very inexpensively. So maybe that's the key thing we should be focusing on. The quality of what we do, the product, what we deliver, and also that it doesn't cost very much at all.
Yeah, we certainly have a success narrative to push, right? And this morning's ASA meeting was really nice. Like you keep hearing about all the different institutes, the different studies, just all the really cool things happening around the system that even while we're, worried about money are happening. So there's lots of amazing stuff to talk about, in addition to the cost effectiveness, and we can, I guess, use the nerd wallet thing too. Okay, so I'll go from there to, let me just give, just share the slides that President Viduko shared when he was giving the sort of update for the trajectory of the consolidation at the last BOR meeting, just because I think that can be helpful to folks. Let me share my screen for just a second. Is that big enough for you? Okay.
Yep.
So this is what he represented as completed to date, the aligned curriculum, the beginning of the transition of Title IV funds to Connecticut State from the 12 colleges, the hiring of the guided pathways advisors, as we know, and the September 22 progress report. And you can actually see the little timestamps here if you want to review it. And then so there are going to be 2 more reports to NECHI, and then expected approval in, I believe, July, after the June 2023 report. I believe the first self-study is due in 2025. So yeah, here it is. So in February 2023, it's they should be reporting to NECHI that governance elections have taken place, the strategic plan has been adopted, legal agreements are in place for Connecticut State from the 12 colleges, the catalog and website are published, students are being accepted for fall 2023, and Title IV funding is officially available for academic year 23 to 24. And then in June, they will be identifying measures for all KPIs tied to priorities within the strategic plan. The Connecticut State budget has been developed. Governance structure is operational. I believe the curriculum committee should be functioning in time for any modifications for courses for the 23-24 academic year. Any modifications for courses need to go through that body, like start in March, I believe. And then specialized accredited programs transitioned, external agreements transitioned, and assessment of the guided pathways model. And then you can see the self-study stuff. All right, I will stop sharing and one second. Okay. So that is what is going on in terms of that, the planned trajectory. I think, as you all know, President Viduko has publicly stated, committed to the fact that department chairs will continue to exist in the consolidated college. And he has said publicly many times at visits to colleges. I know I've heard this, that the org chart isn't set in stone. So as far as sort of collegiality, the space to work together, absolutely, that's definitely improving also at the community colleges. Of course, it remains to be seen what we can do while still on the schedule that we just looked at. But hopefully there will be some chance for some improvements. That said, that schedule has a catalog and website published before February. It has governance in process as we speak. I just want to take a minute and see if anyone from the colleges has any sort of report backs, feedback on what they see in terms of that all being built. Okay. So it's my understanding that recruitment for governance bodies has not yet started. And that'll be an interesting and complicated election, I think. In addition, the catalog needs some serious work. Go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, on the governance, okay. We
Yeah.
have a pretty good governance structure at Tunxus with the PSO. And I'm not sure what our role ought to be. I mean, I think we want to be the ones to organize the election, I guess. But we really don't have any direction from the administration, so perhaps we should just take the initiative or something. I don't know. Kind of weird.
So, I mean, that has been a source of concern for me. I love that the conversations are happening about what modifications should be made. And I see that there are informal conversations happening in informal gatherings of, Meduco with faculty, staff, all the different constituencies within the colleges. What I don't see is any engagement with governance or any guidance as to how governance could weigh in as the actual official representative voice of the faculty, right? So he's getting piecemeal, whoever speaks up, and even on reflection, the things that are most urgently issues to us may have more fundamental underlying issues, something else that we prioritize. So I think I shared with everybody the resolution that we passed at Gateway at our faculty council. And it was just sort of like a general reach out, like, hey, thanks for talking with us. We hope that you'll engage with us as a faculty council or with our governance bodies at some point. But you're right. If you read the September update to NECHI, what it says is nominees from the colleges will be gathered. That's what it says. Not elected, it just will be gathered. And the process for gathering those nominees is unclear. But I agree with you that I think that there's a role to play from our governance bodies to make clear what we want to see for our representation.
Yeah, because the gathering up to this point has been administration picking the faculty they want to work with. That's how they've gathered so far.
Yeah, so there is no process in place, and I think there should be one, but it's very difficult when you look at the composition of the intended governance body to determine like what would be the most appropriate way to do it, right? And that is a puzzle that I suppose maybe they are trying to figure out also at the system. I don't know how we communicate, but maybe we can all collectively think about that here.
Okay.
And
Maybe we can just go ahead and do it ourselves,
mhm.
and then they'll be faced with a fait accompli.
Yeah. Another situation though, because if you look at the composition does not even require, for one of the bodies that there is a representative from each, it's definitely for the curriculum committee, right? It doesn't require that there is a representative for each of the colleges. It just says that we're going to kind of try to aim for that. And if not, send somebody who unofficially sits in and brings information back to your campus. So it's really just not sort of consistent with where we are right now. There's also a question of whether or not we just simply need more local governance. I mean, and more local involvement in curriculum building. I mean, I think the experience of reviewing the catalog has been terrifying for most of us, because I don't know a single program that hasn't reported not just one error, not just two, but like multiple fundamental errors, prerequisites, co-requisites, everything, right? Programs that cannot fly. So somehow that all needs to be published and up and running in February. And it's, this is work we're doing over and above all the other scrambling we're doing. And it's not clear, if we're not owning this, like if we don't feel ownership over this, the collective, accomplishments of people who, like hundreds of people who feel actual ownership over this product cannot be replaced by a couple of managers and a couple of people who are doing it in their spare time with no real obligation or responsibility to fill it out. So I think something really has to be done about who owns this curriculum and who really takes ownership of this curriculum, because it's just too easy to mess up, it seems. Yeah. So I think, I don't know if folks have other, I mean, the governance structure that has been proposed is, once again, it's not the governance structure that a representative group proposed, right? That group was disbanded because we thought that I was part of it, Lois was part of it, Fran was part of it, Paul was part of it, he's here today. That was disbanded because we thought that governance should precede the curriculum and the catalog and all of that stuff and the policies. And that was a hard no. So yeah, there are certainly improvements that could be made in governance, not just getting the thing that's planned up and running, but really talking about whether the structure is adequate. Lois, I see you. Hi. Just wondering if you had anything to say here, just because we suffered that together. You're muted still, Lois.
It wasn't disbanded, Colleen, as much as we were asked to leave. But I'm sorry, but I'm still in a really, really bad mood about finding that document still on the ct.edu website under CCS 101 policy that still talks about teaching students about white middle class norms. So I'm not believing any of these people or trusting any of these people now that I found 2 years later that it's still on their on their website.
Yeah, there have been no modifications there or acknowledgement either of
Not even of
or
Laura Rendon's,
clarification or anything.
not even of Laura Rendon's letter challenging them on misquoting her research.
David?
I think what they've done is they've taken everything that they had that they could find, which responded to, or at least appeared to respond to, one of the questions that Neshi had asked, and just sent it in. For example, they sent in a framework for the strategic plan, which we had said earlier, right? We had not seen in advance, we had not participated in preparing, and we did not agree with it. They sent in the same statement, including the erroneous designation of this committee as the Faculty Advisory Council. A minor point, but it simply shows that what was done was, and this was put into the appendices, what was done is they just took everything they had and they threw it together and they sent it off to Neshi. And the strategic plan is obviously a rather important component. At the very least, it seems to me, a strategic plan should say that, the one community college will maintain all of its 12 campuses for a specified period of time at least, i.e. through the rest of the decade, for example. So there's some guarantee of the persistence of those campuses. It should talk about faculty control over curriculum and pedagogy, including the mode of delivery of courses. And of course, it should talk about the question of department chairs, which you mentioned earlier, Kalina. Right? That needs to be obviously well defined. And those are matters that we'll come back to and do what we can to insist. I will write a letter to Neshi about the framework for the strategic plan. And I asked that the comments that I made, very similar to the ones I made at the board, at this committee last meeting, be included in the board minutes.
And they have been, yeah. And right along those lines, actually, go ahead, Brendan.
You know, I was just kind of thinking about governance, at least, you know, on the university campuses. You know, the governance body has a set of bylaws and procedures that have been established. Um, you know, I don't know if it would be possible to have that kind of discussion across the community colleges. Like, what bylaws would we want to see in, you know, this statewide governance body? And, you know, that could be something that could be brought to the FAC, and, you know, we could discuss it and potentially advise the board that that looks like a pretty good governance structure. It's a huge organization task. I don't know if the existing community colleges campuses are each have their own set of bylaws and there's some sort of way of combining all of them, but those were just the things that came to mind for me.
Lois?
Speaking for Norwalk, we have our own bylaws for our own Senate. I just want to say, David, I do in regard to that, the statements that you've made about the strategic plan and those comments in the introduction, I would like to talk to you a bit about that later, because I'm adding that into the document that I'm writing to Netchi right now. So,
Andre?
Yeah, we too have our bylaws at Trunks's, but some years ago we were all trying to establish a system-wide governance body. I wonder if anybody has worked up any bylaws for that one. But anyway, that was an effort which was scotched because they didn't want to have at the time any system-wide governance. So anyway, so maybe we can basically that's what we want to recreate now. And again, I think the problem is that we're waiting for these jokers in Hartford to figure out what it should look, and whatever they come up with it's obviously not going to be particularly, what's the word, smart. So maybe indeed we ought to just take the initiative and take care of it ourselves. And then, like I said, then they can go ahead and tell us it's the wrong thing and explain to us why.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll have a body, we'll have something of the ready product to go. We're obviously not going to right now, you know, the battle. Let's put it, the battle over the one college versus many colleges is lost. But at least let's try to get something, you know, established that can work for us. And governance is one of those things. So let's just do it.
Gateway has our own structure also, and we actually did a lot of work to, I think at this point it's maybe 2 years ago now. We had like a review committee and we built something that we thought worked really well for us. And then we had a Viking funeral for it because no one had the energy to erect something that would then disappear in a couple of years. It took a lot out of us. So that's in fact what we have, but we have it on reserve and we know what we think will work. But you know, this is one of those things that I wanted this, and one other thing I want to suggest that we return to having gathered some information about the will of the group, right? So from all the different colleges for next time, to figure out maybe what we want to contribute to that governance structure, because it's certainly not ideal. It doesn't seem to have enough local control. At the same time, I think we also need to do a test of actual like willingness. I mean, sometimes when you spend 5 years trying to break people's will, you break it. And there are a lot of people who are having a hard time summoning the will to actually feel like they can take on something that's so much harder than it used to be right now. And it's possible, I mean, at Gateway, we don't have a faculty council chair. We had to have our past faculty council chair volunteer to call a meeting just so that we could do a couple things, get a couple committees erected. And you know, we're continually in that situation. Most people are not sure that they want to continue in the leadership positions, even in the department chairs. Like, we need department chairs, but it's going to be a very difficult position to fill. So yeah. Andre's your hand still up?
Okay. I was just going to comment. I don't know if you're aware of it, but I spent a couple of years at Gateway trying to convince people to redo their governance so that it works. But That was like 20 years ago.
We might have something good now. We burned it on the ship, but
That's why I'm smiling.
Lois, you had a hand again.
I just want to clarify the community college governance assembly that we had was a grassroots kind of a creation. It was not ever meant to be anything official. It was created during the time of the guy who, one of the first presidents of the CSCU. I forget his name. He left. He had a vote of no confidence. But it was created then, and it was very gray. Yeah, right. Gray.
The gray years.
Yes, and it was not meant to be anything more than something that was going to be working right then, and there were no bylaws ever created. It was not meant, there were never a thought to create bylaws. It was just people who got together, and that's all it is. That's all it was.
Okay, so one more thing I want to recommend that we might want to return to is that, you know, as David has like expressed really clearly, we did not participate in the drafting of the strategic plan, and we see lots of areas where it could be improved. That said, President Maduko's presentation on where we're going with NECHI suggests that the KPIs and therefore the data that we're going to be collecting will be tied to the priorities listed in the strategic plan. And if we don't have data collected in the first place, we're not going to get it. And there's so many things that we need to be tracking. I think, you know, one of the best examples was when we invited folks from California here, and they demonstrated that, you know, it's all about what you measure, right? The volume of people coming through these math and English classes does increase, but also the percentage of students who fail out, especially students in certain categories. So I think that whether or not we get involved in that, there might be a need to collect some key data points that are going to be necessary to tracking the things that we're most concerned about. And perhaps that, you know, can inform any further modifications of the strategic plan or something like that. But, you know, if we don't have the resources to collect that data ourselves, so if they're not collecting it, we're done for. So if folks have ideas on that and would even like to meet on that between now and the next meeting, reach out and we'll see. All right, that's pretty much all I have, I think. Oh, no, one more thing. Sorry. Update today. Remember, the ASA committee was going to get updates on the refugee/asylee policy. And it's really impressive how much good work is going into that, and just how much more complicated it was than I realized. They're kind of doing surveys of the different institutions to see like who usually interacts, who usually has responsibility for interacting with refugees and asylees, and what their major issues are. A lot of the issues are, a lot of folks initially, you know, greatest number from Ukraine and Afghanistan right now are dealing with just like basic survival stuff, not ready to go to school yet. But also the prospect of getting their transcripts, proof of past education is just, you know, it's so difficult. And I think any of us who have taught, you know, some of these students before, we know there are highly educated folks in our class who have no hope of ever getting their, you know, their degree information sent and so on. So there's a lot of really good work being done with lots of different organizations and groups in the area to just sort of get a sense of how best to serve students and how to structure it. And I think it's just beautiful to see. So that's coming along.
Right.
There's not yet a report on how many such students we have, but or how many such potential students we have, but they're on their way there. And Andre.
Yeah, I'm actually involved with one such organization, a small one, the Connecticut Immigrant Refugee Coalition. And we have been busy resettling a couple of families, although it's like 15 people per family or something. So, and so we're doing some of that.
I wonder if we couldn't, experiential learning is all one of the catchwords these days. And I think that, you know, if you're able to survive what's going on in Afghanistan or Ukraine, I'm in favor of at least a 12 credit experiential learning just for that. And I wonder if
Toward
we,
peace studies, perhaps?
that's, I'm thinking precisely, we'll be willing to do that. That's important. And I'm glad that at least it's being followed up. Regent Bloom had been pretty insistent on that point, and it's good to see that he's carrying it forward.
I'm really done now.
Okay, so that would include the report on academic and student affairs BOR committee. Yeah. Okay, so report on the universities. Well, as I mentioned earlier, there's the whole question of the anticipated budget deficit and the $100 million for the system as a whole, right? And the usual narrative of crisis that accompanies that, which is that we have to be planning for budget cuts, the 1%, the 2%, the 3, the 4, the 5, or whatever. We're in an unusual situation. In the past, we would usually worry about the governor implementing a 5% budget cut, which he is legislatively allowed to do. This governor has said he's not going to do that. And in fact, he has said that he would fully fund contractually agreed upon wage and fringe benefit increases, which we could probably figure out around 5% per year. Right? Perhaps a bit more, it depends on the fringe benefits. But what we should be, there's two things that strike me. Number one, the impact on faculty morale to be constantly, and I've been here since 1989, and it's pretty well every year that we are in the double crisis mode. Enrollment is declining, retention isn't as good as it should be, graduation isn't up to the numbers we want, and the budget is heading into a deficit. Add to that concerns about the reserves and so forth. And it seems it's important for us to sort of begin to exit that narrative and to insist that we begin to focus on the value added that the universities, and for that matter, the community colleges provide, following up what Kalina said earlier. And that what we want is some objective, some number, and I'm thinking of 10%, which we could propose to the legislature and to the governor. That's what we want to see as an increase to the budget of CSCU each and every year, right? With the understanding, or explicitly made, that will go not for additional administrative positions, not another associate vice president of this or that, which will supposedly solve the problem, but directly into teaching in the classroom and associated services provided by staff. That's what I would like to see. And it seems to me that's something we should be thinking about. The 10% number, I'm just doubling 5%. But that's at least a number, because when we talk about full funding, people look at us and say, well, what do you mean by that? What's your number? And do we have to double the amount that the state is providing? There are plenty of other needy organizations in the state, and that's true, of course. So that's my comment, and I'm certainly going to start insisting upon that at the Finance Committee and at the Board of Regents, that we begin to have a different narrative, a narrative of progress, of a positive outlook towards the future, and not the consistent the sky is falling, the roof is falling, we're going into deficit, our reserves are being expended, and so forth. It really is destructive of faculty morale. And as we go beyond students first, and my sincere hope is that as of July 1st, 2023, that terminology gets retired. Enough. And if they want to talk about building the one community college, all right, let's look at that in terms of the governance issues that have been brought up, the questions of guarantees of the persistence of the community college at its 12 current locations, at least to the end of the decade. And beyond, of course, along with the other issues that we've brought up in terms of faculty control of curriculum and pedagogy, including the mode of delivery, the maintenance of department chairs, and governance structures based on elected faculty and staff, including appropriate structures for each of the individual campuses. So for the universities, I know that we have one particular crisis situation that has come to our attention, and that's the situation at Western. And I see that Ratu is here. So I'd like to just pass on to her and for an update of what's happening at Western.
Thank you, David. I was about to leave, but yeah.
No, I got you. I saw that expression on your face, like, oh, can I be excused? Teacher, my brain is full.
Since that I have a meeting another meeting in a couple of
Sorry,
minutes.
Ratua.
That's okay. I can, but Rob is here to, he can expand on it because he knows as much as I do, if not more. So just very quickly, these are my updates. So we filed a FOIA request for all financial data. So we're still waiting for the files. The second is the two university-wide committees here. So the University Planning and Budgeting Committee and the Janet Committee going through the recommendations from the summer working groups. So the Janet Committee, it seems promising. So we will continue this. So we have a curriculum committee that will meet in a couple of weeks. So we are gonna push those recommendations through the committee. That committee also. This is something that faculty can do because we do have still some control over the curriculum. Not much, but still have some. We did meet with NCHAMS, the two guys who came from NCHAMS. Basically after, so they met with various groups of stakeholders. And basically they admitted that the problem is incompetent leadership, but it's unlikely that we will see it in the report, which is due in November. So we will also, I think we need to let others aware of this. And it's, I can see there is a conflict of interest because they're getting paid by the system office. There is secrecy, culture of secrecy continues. Basically, there is some secrecy around the interim president's salary and how he's getting paid. I think it's likely because the former president is still on payroll. So we are trying to get additional documents from the system office to confirm that the interim president is not getting paid twice. And so finally, as David mentioned, that all the CSUs, basically the whole system, are in ostensibly going to be in financial trouble soon. And so I said ostensibly because, you know, as David said also, that the state has a huge, is estimated to have a huge budget surplus this fiscal year. And with the emergency rainy day fund is chock full, and you know, to the cap. So we have, the state is going to have to spend all that money, and the obvious answer is to fund the public higher education. Well, it's obvious to us, but maybe not to them. So it's obvious that we need to broaden the fight, and I think David and Colleen are going to talk about this soon, later in the agenda, right, at the joint meeting for full funding. Oh, and you mentioned that before earlier, David. So that's my update. I'm sorry I have to go, but any questions? Rob is an expert on this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ritua. Glad we caught you just in time.
I would only add that although she's billed me as authoritative on this, she knows perfectly well that's a snarky thing to have done. But anyway, I will say that we work well together. I think one of the things that I would, as I listen to you all, and gosh, there's so much that community colleges are dealing with. It's just amazing. But I would say a lot of the issues you're talking about, even at one institution facing financial challenges of significant note, it's amazing how these problems persist, even at in a smaller arena. So that's of no surprise, I'm sure, to everyone. I guess what I want to say, though, is that on this positive side, is that invoked by the provost, probably because the union was pushing back hard, these study groups that I'm sure Rotua has spoken to you about, the working groups this summer, were incredibly productive. The two groups that were most shackled were those who asked for excellent financial information. And the current president, Dr. Barron, who's been here, he swears will be here only for 2 years, has said in an open meeting with the AAUP that he really did not have that information, and furthermore that his sights were forward, not reviewing what happened that led to the situation we're in, which for many of us was not satisfactory. But he has received these reports, and I think they have been very productive. The General Education Committee, which I was on, has made short-term and long-term recommendations. Short-term meaning, what can we do in 1 year? Nothing dramatic, but certainly savings of as much as $1.1 million that we recommended. But also a longer-term conversation, which is basically to drastically reform general education program that we adopted some years ago to many of our distress in 2016. And so there are some positive conversations that the faculty is persisting on pushing, but again, the union is having to push back again and again. For example, we said we would not speak to the president in small group. If he wanted to speak to the faculty, he would speak to the whole faculty, which he did do. That Rotua, under her leadership, has continued to push that as a faculty, we need to speak as one. We have regular monthly meetings now, which we didn't used to have. And I guess I would only say that maybe we're going to be a case study for the rest of the institutions, and to watch it carefully, because, we're optimistic at the level of some stuff, not so sure at the level of others, not the least of which being motivated by this Freedom of Information Act requests for budgetary figures, because we're not getting them voluntarily.
David Stoloff and then Mike Shea.
Oh, hi. I heard from an inside source that there is one person doing 3 administrative positions at Western. Is that true?
Not sure that I could answer that reliably. I don't know.
Yeah, I heard. And that goes along with the theme, and that we can discuss in greater detail how the system is bloated by administrators, and that's one of the causes of the financial difficulty.
Mike?
I just want to ask.
Okay.
Can I just go before I have a department meeting at 2:15, and I don't want to, but I just want to raise the issue, and maybe we could talk about this having been at Eastern. The thing that's happening most in the universities right now, at least at Southern, and I thought, well, all 4 faculty senates, I think, know about it, is the announcement at Eastern of the president mentioning that financial exigency was all of a sudden on the horizon because of the budget issue. So I think so. I don't know if David wants to talk about that. I heard this mostly. I mean, as I understand it, at Southern, this was something that was understood by the faculty senate president and other faculty senate presidents that we might have been said at Eastern in a senate meeting by a higher up. So I hate to just throw that in and run off, but I don't know, David, if that's come up at Central, but I think AUP council last night was probably talking about it a lot. So, and financial exigency wouldn't be just for the for the CSUs. I mean, it'd be the whole system. So, but that's in a memo. That language is in a memo from Dr. Chang. I mean, he's saying we need to avoid it. He doesn't want to exercise it, but it's just the fact that it came up, I think, and was mentioned at another campus, I think was causing a bit of a stir. So again, I don't know if David has anything to say about that, but I'm sorry that I have to
No,
run
Mike,
to. Well,
what you say?
I got about 5 minutes, so I'll stay to hear what people say. Thank you.
Yeah, what you say is consistent with what I've heard as well. And so it's part of that narrative of crisis. And I think one of the things we need to do is to indicate that we're kind of fed up with that. That we have actually a well-qualified faculty, hardworking staff, a system which is not a failing system, despite what has been said about the community colleges, and one which is providing value added for the state of Connecticut, both in terms of the knowledge that's produced and transmitted to students, the skills they acquire, their ability to enter into professions and careers, and so forth. And so I think we need to change the narrative. This is one of the few things that we can do. I mean, along with specific proposals for structures of governance, the whole issue of shared governance, of course, that's a major component of it. But on the financial front, time to change channels. We've been on this channel. I've been on this channel since 1989, and personally, I'm fed up. I don't want to hear that channel anymore. And you know what? My TV has a switch on it. Old style analog thing, you turn and you can get to a different channel. But it's a channel which is based on what the reality of what we have at the community colleges and at the universities. And for that matter, let's not forget Charter Oak. David?
Brendan, I hope you'll also get involved in this discussion, but there was a bit of drama at the University Senate meeting. The faculty had, from the Association of Department Chairs, had been distributing a report called Faculty Morale at Eastern. And the president, in her defense, went on the offense and decided to tell us that we were all in trouble and that we could all lose our jobs. And there was some pushback at the meeting. And then there was pushback from our union president, who clearly wrote that if there's any problems, financial problems, that there's a process to go through, and it's not the process that was discussed in the Senate. And the point I made about a couple minutes ago is that Brendan and I can talk about how we think that there's a real amount of administrative bloat at Eastern, high-paid administrators, and they keep on adding them. I mean, it's not that in a crisis of financial crisis, how could they add 2 new positions in the last 2 years? They just, and it's not clear what these people do anyway. But that's not positive. I agree with you, David. To be positive, we need to have a clear understanding of what the relationship between administrators and faculty are. Faculty are the heart of the university. Without us, they don't have courses.
Well, this is, there's Andre, followed by Brendan, followed by Rob.
Yeah, in terms of the narrative, okay, one of the things that, at least for the community colleges especially, that has to be done is we need to redefine, what are success, outcomes or measures of success. I mean, we have a lot of students that come in for specific courses for, I mean, my kid went, when he was in high school, took math and computer science courses. So when he got to Central, he had almost a year of credits, college credits. He was a C student in high school, but an A student in college. So the point is that he never intended to graduate from Tunxes. So the point is it doesn't get measured. And there are tons of students like that. The other thing in terms of the finance, hell, at the very least, they ought to give us a raise to match the inflation, for God's sake.
Brendan?
Yeah, so there was, I think, a little bit of confusion over the way President Nunez described what was going to happen over the next year. It seems like the record shows she said the board would be declaring financial exigency in the spring. And there was a conversation between our statewide union president, Patty O'Neill, and President Chang later that night, in which he said there's no plan to do that. So there is a letter from President Chang, I believe, to all the university presidents stating that they do need to do these doomsday scenario plans and present them to the board, i.e., what are you going to cut if we declare financial exigency? That is definitely not moving in the direction of sort of a positive direction in terms of planning. That's kind of like, which limb are you going to amputate when we shoot you or something like that. And I just don't think it's a very helpful direction to go in. The word deficit is interesting because the reality is our institutions always run in deficit. They do not bring in enough revenue to cover their costs ever. We bring in state funding to make up the difference. And essentially the narrative around deficit, I would translate that into the state doesn't want to pay for what the students are getting. And I don't think that's acceptable. The state has been, foisting austerity on the campuses for 10, 15, 20 years. I think that's why the enrollments have gone down. It's because of the austerity. And furthermore, if you're going to look at sort of straight head count of our student population, that completely ignores the fact that the students we have right now went through COVID. In terms of their education, the pandemic is not over. We know there's a literature about learning loss and that learning loss persists. And so these students are entitled to have the resources they need to get over the pandemic in terms of their education, and the state should bring those resources forth. That's kind of the way I look at it. So that just a few reactions to some of the things that have been said at Eastern and in these letters and that sort of thing.
Rob?
Well said, Brendan. I was just going to add that when I was hired in 95, I was told my department chair before I accepted, this is the job for you if you want to understand that every year you'll be told that the institution is on the brink of financial loss, disaster. And if you can take that as your professional background, you're welcome to be here. So that was 1995. So a little bit after David's 89, but it is a narrative that we have grown to accept and never do anything really to say, no, what about this? And so Colleen, I would just say Kalina's reflection, I think, is powerful to me. The narrative, we have to take control of it or it'll take control of us. And it continues to.
Mark, did I see something for you? Mark Jackson? No, maybe not. Yeah.
No, I'm here. David?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, did you call my name? I just heard my name.
Oh, I thought you had sort of lit up your screen that you wanted to speak.
Oh, I did, but by accident.
Oh, well.
Thank you. Thank you for paying attention.
Okay. Do you want to say anything anyway?
Yeah. No.
Well, let me add, maybe you can chime in as well. We did have a special open forum at Central on Monday, and I would say well over 100 faculty and staff attended. And it was on these questions related to what we're discussing now. Although not so much the financial aspect, which seems to have been more predominant at Eastern. For us, it was more the question of shared governance and the whole problem of the hiring, firing, appointment of mid-level and senior administrators and the role of faculty in that respect, and also the kind of revolving door which seems to have evolved. So there's definitely things going on Mike is gone now, so we really can't have more information about Southern. But certainly there are things going on at the three universities. And so I think, we spend a lot of time talking about the community colleges up to now, and we will continue to do so, right, as we support their efforts to establish proper governance structures, to maintain faculty control of curriculum and pedagogy, and to assure the continued existence of their campuses at their current locations. We have to remember any strategic plan coming out for the community colleges has to say those 12 locations will continue to have community colleges at least of the size that they currently have now. And that's, I think, not negotiable. And it certainly has not been brought up to date. That said, we have to also look at what's going on at the universities. Well, the Finance and Infrastructure Committee, I think we've talked about it. And I will certainly be bringing up this whole question of changing the narrative and moving from the negative one to a more positive one. But of course, that leads us into the whole question of planning for the November joint FAC BOR meeting, where we decided that what we want to discuss is the issue of full funding for public higher education in the state. And of course, we recall public education in the state has two sectors, right? There's A and B in Section 185. I think I can't remember if we're A or B, but the other one naturally is UConn. UConn is a special situation. It's a research university bringing in considerable sums of money from outside sources. It also has a spectacular deficit in two areas. One, the running of the UConn Health Center, which I think comes in at around $40 million of deficit per year, many years now running. And secondly, their sports, which despite the well-earned success of their women's basketball team, nonetheless runs at a deficit, and a considerable one, into the tens of millions, and I think well over $30 million. That said, that's an aside. I wonder if we have any specific items that we would want to include in full funding for public higher education for the CSCU. Elena?
I don't know if this is what we're looking for. I think among the things that we might want to make sure that we mention is the nature of open enrollment institutions and what that means in terms of the need for support for that bridge from high school to college. Right? So making the argument to the legislature that these are often the most expensive students to educate because of the need for the kind of intensive support that allows them to succeed, and that we need dedicated funding to make sure that that persists. Otherwise, that's a huge gap in state services that we are going to need to fill elsewhere.
Yeah.
It's one cost we can enumerate that I think is not often.
Yeah, and of course,
Look
that's
straight
linked
at.
to the Acme business.
Yeah.
Andre?
Yeah, the Acme thing is just totally insane. I mean, I don't know, even whatever. I mean, it's just too much to talk about. I mean, it's just the problem is that we're supposed to take in students, put them in a college level course, and then supposedly give them additional credits, except most of them are working full time and they can't get that help. So the whole thing, what's going to end up doing is, in fact, excluding the very people that the community college is best at, in fact, intended to serve. The people who, in fact, are otherwise, don't have any other chances. We're the last chance they have, and they're going to flunk, and they're never going to appear again. They're going to be discouraged for life. That's the effect of this Acme. Somebody's got to be screaming and hollering at the top of the tower, that this is crazy.
Mary Beth, I think you've had a few comments on this before.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. I will say I was mildly happy to hear that at least for the math plan, the plan that's being written does require that the same instructor teach both sections, like the co-requisite and the other course, which was not necessarily in the original plan. And I at least feel like that gives some chance to the student, so that you can essentially do the work that you would need to do to bring the student up to speed while you're doing the rest of the teaching of the class, if that kind of makes sense. So it's, as opposed to it being like, here's a separate class that you have to go to that maybe somebody else is sort of in charge of and doesn't really know what you're doing. So if I have 6 credits worth of time that my students are sitting with me, I can sort of do that however I see fit to try to help those students, which is very different than just I teach a section and there's other people that are, you know, maybe doing like the tutoring part of it. So that was at least somewhat helpful to me. Again, there's still so many concerns, but that did help a little bit in my mind when I found that out recently.
That's great. And it seems that it is being suddenly slowed down a little bit more, right? And phased in a little bit more. And it probably has a lot to do with that part of the plan, because now you need to hire instructors for all of these courses, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Which is, but that's so much better. Yeah. And again, that's the need for investment, like right there. I thought it was really interesting. Like, I think that we've had a bunch of conversations with both Rich Balducci and the previous chair of the ASA committee to the board. So Rich Balducci is the chair of the finance and infrastructure, and he had some comments about, I wasn't entirely clear on exactly where he was going with this, you know, but about the, I don't know if the challenge, I would put it that way, the challenge that we all have to face when we are trying to deal with students at such different levels of preparedness, right? So I think there's a, you know, an awareness that that is a huge challenge for us. And as the chair of finance and infrastructure, a focus on that. And at the same time, like I think it's important not to understand that, like, that is our mission. Like that's our mission. It's nothing, it's not something to be indignant about. Like that is core to the mission. So that has to be placed front and center on the budget, which is, you know, would reflect that.
I would add it's our privilege to work with those people. That changes the discourse, right? It's not just our challenge, it's our privilege, and that's
Right.
what we do.
Right. And well.
And well.
And there are amazing professionals who have done this for decades now. And it's such an amazing resource to be able to provide the state. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also the thing that gives us, what's the word, satisfaction. Okay, all of us, I think. I mean, that's what's special about this faculty. You know, we care.
So I'll be contacting the chair of the board, Joanne Ryan, to plan the agenda. So the idea is it'll be the first hour of our FAC meeting in November, because the board apparently, for some reason I'm not clear on, doesn't meet in November, right? So we would have an hour, and I'll try and work it out in 15-minute blocks or something, because I mean, we can get stuck on one point and not progress past it. So I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions as to what the blocks might be. And if not now, at least send it to me by an email.
And David, excuse me, it's Pam. You can forward any of those logistical kinds of questions to me as soon as, if you want to poll the FAC to see who will be with you on the November FAC meeting. I'll make sure that I can go ahead and get working on getting the regents together for that meeting as well.
Yeah, and there's a question whether we want to have it as a hybrid meeting, that is to say, partly in person, partly online.
Yeah,
I don't know.
we can
Pam,
do, we can
what you
do
meant.
that, and we have one more test of a hybrid kind of model for the October board meeting, so you can make your decision when you see how well, I'm changing the narrative, how well that worked.
Yes.
So,
That's the one at Middlesex, right? So we'll be.
yes, we're going to be at Middlesex.
Yeah. I mean, just in passing, what I've noticed having chaired a hybrid meeting conference over the summer is you need at least two people, if not three, right? One is actually chairing the meeting and dealing with the folks who are present in person. Another person is checking the computer, the chat line, and the hands being raised by the figures, by the images. And I see, for example, Jennifer, I'll come back to you in a second. And the third one needs to look after the technical equipment, because all of a sudden the link sort of fails and the images aren't there, and so forth. So
It truly takes a village.
yes,
Just
there we
saying.
go. Jennifer?
I also want to mention, as someone who has an accommodation who has to call in for the meeting, that there's also sort of training that has to be done for people about the etiquette, those people who are in the face-to-face meeting, to not have side chatter, because then the person listening in has a hard time, which is tricky to navigate, because I think things are switching back to on ground a lot. And I think that's going to be an ongoing access issue.
Agreed. We're still struggling with who is commander of the mute button, and how do we stop shuffling of papers and those kinds of things, and microphones, and it is a learning process for all of us. So if you want to hold off, David, on the and Kalina on the decision until you see how well it works at Middlesex, and then you can make the decision.
We'll chat after that meeting.
Excellent.
During the closed executive session, we usually find ourselves in the waiting
The
room.
lobby somewhere.
In the lobby, yes.
Agreed.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
All right. So do send in to me or to Kalina, but send in to me any suggestions that you have for the issues. But clearly, I think some of the things that we've seen from today's meeting are, first of all, changing the narrative. Secondly, also looking more carefully at what we're measuring, right? I'll give you an example. My partner, Sally, wanted to take a class at Northwest Community College on horse physiology. Had she taken that class, which unfortunately got canceled, but had she taken it, she would have been listed as not having graduated and would be part of the failure of the community college. But she has her PhD from Berkeley in philosophy. So, we want to know more about what's happening to the recent high school graduates, what's happened, and there we have also, majority and minority students, and that's an important consideration. People who are coming back to the community college after a certain number of years at home or at work, right? Those return students, that's a separate group. People coming just for a class or two and they never intended to graduate. And why are we including them in the statistics? Asylum seekers and refugees, that's another class that we've just been talking about, and more. Because unless we look at those differentiated numbers, we really don't know where the problems are and where the successes are. I've always been amazed at the fact that if a student graduates from the community college with an associate's degree and comes to Central and does extremely well, as many do, and graduates and goes on for a further higher education or a successful career right out of the university, we don't count them as having graduated from Central, because that's how these statistics have been defined. Now, that may well be how the feds do it, but I think we have to begin to insist that we have a better and a finer grain analysis of what is going on. And secondly, the other thing is that if a university student somebody comes to Central, I had students in the honors program who after 2 years had done so well that they transferred to Yale. Well, they were listed as not having graduated. But they did. They graduated from Yale. And so all that has to be looked at, along with the other question which comes up: what is the distribution and the evolution of salaries and positions for management confidential, for teaching faculty, support staff, coaches, et cetera, right? Because we just usually in the top spreadsheet that we see for the revenues and expenses of the institutions, of the universities, and I know that for my institution, as having chaired UPBC, the University Planning and Budget Committee, for a number of years in the past, in the decade of the zero zeros, that it's all lumped together. And so we can't really tell what is going on there, right? We don't know, right? And the problem may be, maybe you do have to add some management confidential, but let's be clear about that you have in fact increased that number. And then what are the metrics for them? Because we have metrics for the faculty, but we don't have metrics for the administrators. And I think it's about time that we started to have those metrics as well. So those are some of the issues that come to my mind. Andre, and then Kalina.
Actually, I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, then we'll go to Kalina. While you think about it, we'll go to Kalina.
Just a connected issue that might come up is that in addition to that, we should be tracking, the percentage of full-time sort of permanent positions, because at the community colleges, among like non-management faculty and staff, we're increasingly relying on these like super short-term contracts. And if the threat to even tenured professors of potentially having their programs eliminated is going to tank morale, more so when you don't know if you're going to be employed in a couple of months all of the time for years on end. So yeah, it does have an impact.
Andrea, are you?
Yeah. Yeah. What I'm saying in terms of gathering data, in terms of success or what measures of success there are, probably the best thing to do is to ask the students what goals they had when they came in, and also ask them when they left, did they accomplish them? And, in other words, just that simple thing would give us the data we need. Just ask the students.
Okay, so we'll continue thinking about the agenda, the specifics of the agenda for the meeting, but we know that we'll be doing that in the first hour of the next FAC meeting, to be determined whether hybrid, or entirely online or entirely in person. I guess the choice will probably be between hybrid and online. That said, we have one more item on our agenda, the planning for the November FAC pre-conference. Can I pass that over to Kalina? Do you have the information, or do we?
To me, no. And
Okay.
Diane's not here. And I have once again not necessarily followed up with her as well as I could. Carmen.
You're muted, Carmen.
All right, hi. Sorry about that. So Diane, Mary Beth, and I had met, and then I think one of them had followed up and sent an email to Kalina and David about, does this seem reasonable, the people that were going to get to speak? I don't know if she heard back from you, so we just decided to go ahead and send it out to the possible speakers. And so I did it. So Laura McCarthy, we asked her to speak on ACME, and she said she wouldn't be here at that time. So that I asked her if she has any suggestion of somebody else. But I think that last meeting we got another name, Rebecca Riss-Brown, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, so we need another person for ACME if we still keep it on November 4th. Patty O'Neill did respond and said I'd be happy to speak on the state of affairs at Western. And then Joe Salvaggio from Three Rivers, we had asked him about speaking on behalf of the status of department chairs at community colleges. And I sent him an email. I haven't heard from him yet. I did follow up with a phone call, another email. So we have 1 out of 3, and there's still, now we still have to find someone for do ACME if we decide to go ahead with that.
Okay, we were talking about an hour and a half, right? And this would be
Right.
entirely online. And
Right.
do we have a list of names, of email addresses of all the people we want to invite? Do we have a means of communicating with all these people? Now, not the speakers, but possible attendees, i.e. faculty and staff at the community colleges and universities.
We didn't talk about that, so I'm just assumed that we did, but we did not talk about that.
The last time we did a virtual conference, somebody at System Office sent it out as one of the
Okay.
CSCU announcements, just like they send out the board
Okay.
meeting invitations. and
Yeah,
stuff.
that solves that problem.
We
Thanks.
should still have that access, right? Yeah.
Okay, and we're talking about November the 4th. What times did you have again?
Well, we kind of left it open because we wanted to see what the speaker's availability was and to see if there were certain times they could do it. And Patty O'Neill responded, said she could do it. She didn't mention a specific time. So I was kind of waiting to see about the other two. But again, we still have to find someone for Acme, and I'm still waiting to hear back from Joe. So we didn't want to pick a time because we didn't really know
Okay.
what the availability of the two other speakers would be.
Could we do it, say, within a week?
Okay. Possibly I'll follow up again more with Joe. I'm not sure if you'll say yes or no. Joe Savalgio from Three Rivers, but we need another option for someone to talk about, another speaker to talk about Acme, so I can get a hold of that person.
Mary Beth?
I don't feel like I know enough at this point to really speak knowledgeably about it because I'm not on any of the current committees of people who are working on it. So I recently just got an update and was surprised to find things out that I wasn't aware of. So I don't think I wouldn't feel comfortable updating everybody on something that I don't really know enough about at this point.
Yeah, that's fine. So we still have it as a plan. It's online. It's November the 4th. The three topics are Acme, Western, and department chairs.
Right.
And so, well, let's go ahead. We're going to do it. I mean, and just let us know the time that you want to choose. An hour and a half. It'll be half an hour on each topic. Those people who show up will show up, and that's that. I mean, I think thank you for the work that you've done planning for it. I'm sorry not to have responded to your email, so I take responsibility for that one. But it looks like we should have a go. It's not going to cost us anything. It's basically just setting up a WebEx. I guess we should do it on WebEx. I guess we'll have to do it on.
So Diane had spoken with Vu, who I think is director of IT or associate director of IT or something. He's on this committee as Diane's alternate. He couldn't also be here today, but she reached out to him and he's happy to coordinate all the WebEx and do that whole part of it for us, as well as we're going to do an RSVP form. So we'll send out the invite to it. And then when we have an RSVP, people can put questions right into the RSVP as opposed to having people have to email questions. This way, it's as you're RSVPing, if you have a question on this topic, you can put the question right in there. And then that way it'll allow us to gather any questions that people have. And my only suggestion would be, I think probably by the middle of next week, we really need to send the at least the save the date, if not the actual invite out. So maybe if we only end up with 2 people willing to speak, maybe we just do an hour on 2 topics instead of an hour and a half on 3 topics. If we aren't able to get confirmation, because it is hard. We're emailing people, and if they don't get back to us, the speakers haven't gotten back to us. It took a while, and then so then somebody gets back to us, and then they can't do it. So now I have to find somebody else. So it's a process, and so it does take a little bit of time. But I think at least if we can get at least 2 people, then we can at least move forward with it.
All right. So again, I think we still need I need some names of people that you might suggest that we could reach out to speak on. If anybody has ideas for Acme.
Yeah, I wonder if I'll ask at my university. We have developmental math people. We have, in fact, a whole section in our math department on developmental math, right? And they have lots of statistics. They were never consulted, of course, on Acme, even though those students coming from the community colleges will be showing up at the university and supposedly satisfying our requirements for math. So I can do that as well and get back in touch with you, Carmen.
Okay.
I'll do that on Monday.
Is that something you feel like they would know they would have, are they on the Acme committee?
No, so they would have done, I met with the two people from the math department, say 6 or 7 months ago when Acme first came to my
Right.
attention. And it was one of the chair of the president of our Senate is in the math department, but it was with one of the developmental math people, and he had statistics of all sorts. I mean, they have been following this extremely closely. And we also have a faculty member who's been looking particularly at the problems of minority students with respect to math. So I wonder if I can't, I'll contact them on Monday. And see
Okay,
what-
I guess then we change the topic a bit, I
wouldn't-
guess.
It
because
would be slightly different than Acme at that
Right,
point.
right.
Exactly. Okay, it could be more of a update on developmental math,
Yeah.
data on developmental math or something like that.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, because someone at the last meeting, I just wrote this name, and I don't know who this person is, from Middlesex Community College, Rebecca Riss Brown, that said, oh, she'd be a good person to talk about Acme. Does anybody know who she is? Okay. I'll cross her name out here. I just wrote this down. All right. Well, David, if you want to do, we can maybe change it, or if anybody else here who has an idea that.
Do we know who is on the Acme working groups? Like, are there?
That's what I was thinking.
There's nobody from my campus that I know of on it, but I don't know if there's other people who know of people.
Well, I did ask Laura McCarthy if she has a suggestion. She said she couldn't do it, but I said, do you have a suggestion of someone who could? So I'm still waiting to hear back from her also.
Okay. Well, email me, Carmen, on Monday.
Okay.
I'll shoot out an email to the faculty in math, but if, the priority is to Acme as such.
Right. Okay.
Speaker.
Okay. Okay. I thought there was a lot of people here that mentioned all these names, so maybe not. I mean, maybe I'll have to find who is on the working committee and maybe just maybe talk to the chair. I don't know if Laura is the chair, but anyway. All right. If anybody has any suggestions, send it to me though. All right.
I think Carmen, the problem is that they said they were charging ahead and this was the plan. And in the past even week or so, it's in such flux that it's hard to say who would be able to say anything authoritatively about what's happening with Acme now.
Okay.
I think that might be the reason you're hearing silence at the moment.
Right. It's crickets here. Okay. So Jennifer just wrote about Christine Ruggiero from Middlesex is a co-chair of CSET, which is math. Is that CSET?
She's great. English.
Oh, okay. And she's on the Acme. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And she also used to be an FAC rep. She's great.
Okay. So maybe I could, do we need someone from math and English or someone that knows about both of these? I mean, at
this point, I think if we just get any kind of Acme update, even if it's not everything, it's probably better than nothing.
It will allow the people other than members and alternates to the FAC to, hear what's happening. And
perfect.
Get, at least be aware of the fact that there is an issue with Acme.
Right.
Okay. A lot of people probably don't know that.
And I guess I can definitely say Amanda Sweeney has always been very vocal and very informative on our campus and throughout. So but she's done a meeting on this also with the FAC before. But even still, we could reach out to her also.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so Amanda Sweeney in Gateway. Okay, thank you. All right, I'll contact them. Is that with math or English? Do you know, or do you?
She's math.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Well, we've arrived at that happy moment with 15 minutes to spare for our 2-hour time limit. Are there other matters that we want to discuss?
I just want to bring one thing up. This might be sort of minor, but just kind of speaking about governance. Yesterday, our college governance, our Senate chair will send out a list of when all the departmental meetings will be, the curriculum meeting and the Senate meetings will be for the semester or both semesters, or no, just for the first semester. And yesterday there were some system-wide meetings that were going on at the same time as our Thursday departmental meetings. And I just wanted to know, I don't know if anybody else in the other colleges are experiencing this, where normally when we have the governance meeting set out that you don't schedule other meetings during that time. Now we have kind of this, not just our college, but we have this one system. And so our chair and some other people had to miss the meeting because there was Achieve the Dream meeting. And I don't know, there was a couple of things that were going on that were system-wide. I don't know, who to talk to about that, or anybody else has experienced that, maybe kind of, well, I guess we'll just find out what the state of governance is of the individual colleges. Maybe it's just like, but we don't, just something to think about.
Yeah, we should do a survey of some sort and it must be very complicated now for the community colleges because precisely there's overlap during the transition period.
Right.
And that's related to, what sort of proposal could we make for local structures of governance and a sort of one college structure of governance that would properly reflect faculty expertise in curriculum and pedagogy and the foundational role that faculty play at the institutions. So that's going to be a challenge for us to figure out.
Yeah, just something to think about and be aware of.
Okay. I just want to make one point. When I was talking earlier about the new vice chair of the Board of Regents, it's Dr. Jim McCarthy, who is a recent appointee. He has a background in public health policy and administrative experience at the City College of New York, City University of New York. So I'm going to actually contact him about the follow-up to the COVID-19 mandate and measures that are being taken. I should have mentioned this earlier. I know there was a COVID clinic at my university yesterday, and I went for my 5th shot. So I'm now up to date on the Omicron shot as well. But that's something we should be following. And I'm going to contact McCarthy because I have gotten no further feedback from the system office folks who are looking after the COVID mandate in terms of sum up of what happened and lessons we can draw from the future. Okay, with that, I think we're adjourned. Do I have a motion, a move
To adjourn.
to adjourn? All right, and not hearing anybody complaining to continue, we are adjourned, and so I'm going to stop the recording at this point. Thank you, and see you all well, for the November get together and then the regular meeting.